Well, one of the things about the report that came through in the research to me was that Minnesota has far more resources than most states out here. At the same time, we probably don't do as much to coordinate those resources, to link them up with small towns that are in need of services and with small community entrepreneurs who could really get started and off and running and grow if they could access these services. So we end up having almost an opposite situation that you find in some of our neighboring states, where they have fewer resources but actually work to try to get those resources into the hands of the people. All states, and including here in Minnesota, we seem to have a problem of how to evaluate those business services that we offer. The easiest way is to say we're giving tax breaks of some kind, creating some kind of incentives, and therefore X numbers of jobs have been created. Well, that might be created there, but where did they come from? Were they simply moved? Or at what cost did these jobs come? And that part doesn't get evaluated very carefully, and it should. Going forward, we need to be watching these things more closely. At the same time, it's a problem all across the country, and with federal programs as well as state, that the little mom and pop operation, whether it's a retailer or whether it's a small manufacturer of some kind in a small town, if they had access to expansion capital, to capital formation, if they had some services that would help them understand or develop a good business plan, they could be adding 1 or 2 or 3 jobs in towns where that's a big deal. But it isn't against when you go measuring big programs. And so states, critics, nonprofit organizations, anybody who looks at economic development has problems knowing exactly how to evaluate and analyze the benefits. To say that I'm excited about what we're going to try to do here in Minnesota 2020, because in my case, it's kind of a culmination of 36 years of journalism. I didn't start out being interested in economic development or economics at all, but I was a political writer. And then when I was in Washington, the Soviet Union started buying grain from the United States, and they'd never previously done this. So I get called into the office, and the bureau chief was in a conference call with executive editors, and they said, "Lee, do you know what corn is?" And I assured them, from being from Minnesota, I knew what corn was. Well, they turned me loose to find out what the Russians were up to. The Russians were buying wheat, but being from Minnesota, I had an idea what that was too. So I got involved in economic and writing, not by any design, but because of who our Minnesota readers were. Because among our papers was the St. Paul and Duluth and Grand Forks newspapers at the time. So it was very logical that somebody would be paying attention to this. Well, 36 years later, you get busy, and 36 years later, I'm leaving the paper, and this is what I've been writing about. And now we can focus on those things. So many things have changed. Agriculture is healthy now. It wasn't in the 1980s. It just flip-flopped. Now our farms are fairly strong, those that are left, but our small towns are mostly hurting. And so the demographic changes have occurred, and I'm just not willing to give up on places like Kirkhoven, Minnesota, where I was born. I still think that they can have a bright future, and but that doesn't mean just sitting around waiting for something to happen. It means we've got to help people grab hold of things and make things happen.